What's up, Rovers? Today we're going to be looking at a new way to handle parries in Wuthering waves. This new tech actually consists of two different techniques, one of which requires the other first, but you can use it alone. We will also go deeper into explaining how the parry system in Wuthering wave works. I'm sure there's some attacks you just hate having to deal with, right? Let's watch what's going on here. Anything seem odd? The parry timing seems way off, right? Don't worry, I'll explain that later. It's how parry mechanics actually work. But also, how about this clip? A parry and a perfect dodge? And I can do it again and again. So how's that possible? How do we continuously do that? Well, there are rules for that too, but it can be done reliably. First of all, I'm sure you're all familiar with the basic parry in Wuwa by now. Basically, when you use any attack on an enemy with a yellow circle, so long as your attack connects with their hitbox after the outer yellow circle collapses within the inner circle, you will successfully parry, dealing a ton of, I'm just gonna call it shield damage to make it easier to remember. It does little actual damage to the enemy, but opens them up for a moment to DPS when they're staggered, while also significantly expediting the rate you can deplete their shield to land a full stagger window. So that's obvious. But that doesn't explain how I was able to parry this, or this, or this, or these. So what is exactly going on here? Remember my why you should build Rover video? I explained how Rover had very good hitboxes that were quick to come out for parry, with a bigger range second swing in case you missed. That was also fast. I also mentioned that her normal chain reset window was fast, allowing you to gain access to the first hit, the fastest hit, again, earlier than most units. But I also explained how her hitbox lingers longer than most units. This is extremely important to the technique I'll be introducing today. Let's call it pre-parrying. What is pre-parrying? It is the act of producing a hitbox far in advance of an expected attack that can be parried with a hitbox that lasts longer than the parry window. Instead of directly countering the enemy's attack at the correct moment, you let the enemy approach and collide with your hitbox. The enemy is the one that moves instead to you. This is extremely useful for later game content, which consists of enemies that move quickly, attack quickly, and gap close quickly. The closer you are to the enemy, the less time you have to react and land a parry, because the enemy has less distance to travel before they can hit you. You also cannot parry them too early because you must wait for the yellow circle to collapse properly. Thus, the further you are away from the enemy, within reason, the more time you have to land a parry, because the enemy has more distance to travel before they can hit you. So long as your hitbox is still alive by the time they hit you, they will parry themselves. This is extremely important for two reasons. One, it massively increases the practical parry window, making it much easier to deal with lightning blitz attacks like Tempest Mephis's entire attack pattern, Morning Ike's multiple grabs, and all of Thundering Mephis's spear charge attack, as well as Impermanence Heron's flying headbutt. You can even pre-parry before the yellow circle flash, which is when a parry is normally allowed, because in this case, Rover's hitbox actually lasts longer than the entire real parry window. And two, your hitbox exists independent of your unit, and so long as your unit remains on the field, it so also remains. It is possible to take other actions after pre-parrying and have the pre-parry succeed. This allows you to do things like casting skills that normally interrupt your actions, or dodging, and I will get into the second point later as it deserves its own section. There is one caveat to pre-parrying. It only works on bosses using gap closer moves. Coincidentally, these consist of Tempest Mephis, Thundering Mephis, and Morning Ike's, as well as Impermanence Heron, but two of which, in my opinion, are the hardest bosses the game has available. In particular, those moves are also the most annoying ones to deal with, and these are extremely useful against hologram fights and when they show up in a Tower of Adversity. So why does it only work on gap closer moves? Remember when I mentioned how your hitbox can linger, and that Rover was one of the best for this? Now, this hitbox only lingers until it hits an enemy or expires naturally. Notice how this attack I pre-parried successfully, and this attack, my pre-parry, failed. The first attack, my hitbox persisted unless Mephis collided with it. In the second attack, my pre-parry directly hit the boss as it was preparing to lunge. Now, if your attack makes contact with the enemy at any time, the hitbox instantly disappears prematurely. This makes sense, since you shouldn't be able to hit the boss multiple times with one swing, right? Now, there is an exception to this I'll explain later. Therefore, in the second example, I no longer have a lingering hitbox to pre-parry the boss once its attack goes through and I get hit. Thus, you should only pre-parry ranged moves to make sure you don't hit the enemy in advance. This can be done consistently by learning a boss's attack patterns and using pre-parries when appropriate to much more safely deal with difficult gap closer attacks that have extremely tight parry windows naturally. This also means that bosses that move around a lot, like Tempest Mephis, Morning Ikes, should be left alone and wait for them to come to you instead of chasing them down. Hopefully, this makes some hard encounters you've been struggling with a bit easier. Alright, how about the exception for pre-parrying? I said in my Jian vs Yinlin video that Jian's skill is the most broken parry tool in the game, only rivaled by his ult. So why is this? Remember how I said that pre-parrying makes you lose your hitbox if you directly hit the enemy? Jian's skill consists of multiple hits in quick succession with one spear lunge. It also has a fat hitbox. The multiple hits negate the lost hitbox issue since every damage instance will create a new hitbox that can successfully parry. This is the reason why Jian is both amazing at close quarters parry while also being able to 100% parry gap closers at all times, even if you mistime the initial hit of the skill. Combined with his ult, which is required for DPS whenever available, he has monstrous parry tools available to the player. I personally sometimes hold on to a skill out of ult and don't use it when I expect the boss to use a difficult gap closer attack soon, just so I can cast the skill to pre-parry without needing to worry about timing. This is also the reason why I don't think Jian will be power creeped for a long time, because he is not just meta because top DPS. It's also because of the AoE, the pseudo grouping, and the most broken parry tools in the game all in one unit. Now that we've got that topic finished up, let's take a look at the next evolution from pre-parrying. This is what I call a parry cancel. It can only be done when pre-parrying and can noticeably improve your DPS and directly counters certain bosses that have inflated health, while also producing more Calcharo energy or resonance energy depending on the unit or weapons you're using, while also being able to proc relevant buffs on certain units. Basically, you parry and dodge counter at the same time. So how is this possible? Remember how I said that pre-parrying produces a lingering hitbox so long as the enemy doesn't collide with it, that exists independent of your character's actions? If you cast a skill or dodge after pre-parrying, but before the parry lands on the boss, you will do the skill or dodge while your pre-parry hitbox remains alive. This is extremely important because it allows you to benefit from two DPS situations at once. Let's assume you dodge countered with a parry cancel. Normally, parrying does little damage, but does massive shield damage so you can get closer to the next full stagger. Dodge counters instead do big damage, but very little shield damage. Parry canceling with a dodge counter allows you to deal both big damage and massive shield damage at the same time. However, remember that pre-parrying can only be done on gap closer attacks, but if a boss does it, you can punish them heavily for it. This is extremely noticeable on Tempest Mephis, which is relatively the highest HP mob in the game and is full of gap closer moves. Because dodge counters are very fast, not only can it be used to generate Calcharo energy or resonance energy, but you can immediately follow it up with your usual parry rotation of echoes, skills, ults, etc. While you can parry cancel with both skills and dodges, I would always recommend canceling with a dodge counter, because you can skill immediately afterwards, whereas you cannot really dodge counter the other way around if you skill first. Now, a good candidate for this, but extremely hard to pull off, would be Calcharo while in his ult. He's able to pre-parry, albeit with some difficulty since his rotations are already complicated. But his ult dodge counter does absolutely massive damage, so being able to squeeze in extra dodge counters while parrying at the same time will definitely eat into enemy life bars. I myself am still learning to play Calcharo better and cannot pull this off consistently just yet. I cannot think of any other resonators that can benefit from this technique more than him, but it is a universally applicable move to anyone you deem comfortable enough with pre-parrying gap closer moves. Hopefully the parry cancel damage will add up and make your hologram and tower boss clears easier. Cheers! If this is your first time watching, feel free to leave a like or better yet subscribe. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Stick around if you want to see interesting videos on a nearly daily basis. You don't miss out on any of that, do you? That'll be it for this video. Thank you all for watching and see you all next time.
Silence we drown in. Hear the knell of death draw nigh. Who do not